Okay, being 3 o'clock, we will call the meeting of the Marathon County Extension Education Economics Development Committee. Number 2, Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Get over that. Okay, number 3, public comment. We have none. Number 4, approve of the March 2nd, 2023 EEED committee meeting. Motion by Tom, second by Kim. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 5, policy issues, discussion, and potential committee determination. None. Number 6, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy.
I think you're on the wrong one. There you go.
Am I?
Yeah. There you go. There are policy.
Oh,
Number 5. There you go.
where am I going? Oh, I'm on the last, I was on the last, I was looking at the minutes.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay. Hey, we're, no. Sorry about that. Okay. Policy issues for discussion and potential committee determination. 5A, discussions regarding of the 2024 annual budget and policy recommendations from the committee. 5A, 1, 2, and 3, I'll read all 3 of them because they're pretty much concerned to the budget. Review of the monetary discretionary program document. Number 2, review rate and fee documents. Number 3, review of 5-year department expense levy and documents. John's on the line.
I am.
Okay. Do we?
So thank you. And
Okay, thank you, John.
you want me to go with an overview from the Human Resources Finance Property Committee?
I would imagine we probably should, so, because there's members here that haven't heard it yet, so go ahead, John.
All right, well, thank you. And I apologize for not being there in person, but I had a prior commitment. So we're embarking on a new process relative to our approach to the budget, and we presented that to the county board, and you approved the concept at the March meeting, and now we're into the implementation. We shared with you some of the background information that goes into developing the county budget at the educational meetings, and now we're trying to sit down with the various standing committees and begin the discussion of what should be in the 2024 budget. And we're going to, stumble along the way, but hopefully at the end of the day, we'll have a better process. So we're asking the committees to look at the documents that you've been provided with, and Administrator Leonard and staff prepared the mandatory services review that gets into what programs are required. What's missing in there is the degree or the level of service required. And I like to use the example of the Sheriff's Department, where we're required to have a Sheriff's Department. We're not required to have a bomb squad, a crisis assessment response team, and other unique programs. But we do those because they're protective of public health and safety, and it's a choice. So you want to look at that document. You'll also want to look at the rates and fees, and the library has an extensive set of fees that are set by the library board. And then there's a 5-year budget comparison that shows you trends. What we're really looking for is the committees to provide input into the budget process, and what programs do we deliver, and should we continue to do this? Are there new programs that we should be doing? What level of service should we be providing those at? Is there a target population, and what sort of rates or fees should we be charging for those services to the residents of the county? You're in a somewhat unique situation as a committee. Under your jurisdiction is the University Extension Program, and the budgeted amount for the county is $299,632, of which $231,000 or 77% comes through the levy, which represents 0.1% of the total county budget. While that's the case, we need to remember too within the extension that the state of Wisconsin funds a portion of every one of those positions that we have. So it's a shared position. So if we cut a position, we're also decreasing the amount of state aid or state assistance that we receive. In the context of the library is under the state statutes, a somewhat independent board. They have a budget of basically $800,000, of which a little over 3.1 million comes from the levy, or 85% of their budget comes through the levy. And the reason we throw those out there are some programs where there is a very small percent of the levy that goes into funding those programs, and others where a significant portion of that budget is covered through the county tax levy. And the long and short of it is not all dollars are the same. So if you cut $1 out of the library, it's 85 cents on the levy. If you cut things out of some of the other programs, for instance, highway, it's 34 cents is on the levy. So keep that in mind. We're also asking you to review our nonprofits. In this case, both McDevco, Marathon County Economic Development Corporation, receives a $40,000 a year subsidy from us in exchange for certain expectations on the part of the county, and the Historic Society receives a $54,376 appropriation from the county to provide services to the residents, and we'd encourage you to look at that. But what we're looking for is thoughts from the committee as to what programs are required, understanding that there are some statutory provisions relative to the library and contractual relationships relative to the University of Wisconsin Extension that come in there, but they help us and help the administrator prepare the budget that they'll ultimately send to the county board. The Human Resources, Finance, and Property Committee will be meeting next week, and we'll be trying to identify what the budget priorities are, looking at the issues of compensation, health insurance, structural deficit or use of reserves, capital expenditures, and other items. We'll be presenting that to the county board for your review and approval later this month. We'll also begin working on budget assumptions that will be passed on to the county board, so you have an understanding of what goes into making the budget in terms of what we're anticipating in terms of potentially shared revenue, general transportation aids, growth in sales tax, et cetera. So we're beginning this process. We'll again stumble before we walk, but we look forward to your input and engagement, and I'll turn over to Administrator Leonard for additional comments.
Thank you, HR Finance and Property Committee Chair Robinson, and thank you, Chair Seefeld. I'll try to be brief. I like the way that Chair Robinson laid out kind of ultimately the policy questions before the board, because I think that's a really thoughtful way of approaching this, because in going to the previous three committees that we've had these discussions with, we've had a couple of kind of highlight takeaways, and one of them, probably the most overarching and most common theme, is, wow, this is a lot of information. and that is absolutely true. So how do you, as a standing committee, look at that, and how can you start to, early on in the process, provide input, direct input to me and to staff in building that budget. And as Chair Robinson referenced, this committee is a little bit unique, somewhat, not entirely unique, very similar to actually infrastructure this morning. But as Chair Robinson said, your relationship you have with the committees, the departments that come before you and the partners that come before you is an interesting one. UW Extension, we have 0 county staff that work within UW Extension. And that is somewhat, for those of you that have been on the committee, I know Chair Seifelt, you've been on the committee for a number of years, that is a relatively new development. That hasn't always been the case. We had office staff, but we've really moved through the kind of iterative process of extensions, reorganizations recently to a contract for services model. And you might look at that and say, oh, do we have less opportunity for input? And I would say absolutely not. When you look at that mandated services document before you, it really speaks to what I think and what Supervisor Robinson referenced as the first primary policy question before you as a standing committee, and that is, what services do we deliver? And the reason mandated versus discretionary is important is for the reason we talk about frequently, and that is we, counties, are arms of the state of Wisconsin. They use us as you use your hand, as a tool to affect the will that you have. The state wants us to do things. It tells us we have to do them. So those are the mandated programs. That said, you still have a great deal of input on that process because service level, the second question, second policy question exists. But let's start with policy question number 1. What services do we deliver? And that is what the mandated and discretionary document is meant to provide you some insight on. It is accurate. I wouldn't say it's precise because the information within that document it's meant to start a conversation should you wish to have one about individual programs. There are things, I'll use the solid waste department for an example, and I know that's not, actually let's use library. As noted in the document, you're not mandated to have a library, but the county board has made a decision many moons ago to have a consolidated library service. The fact that you're not mandated to have a library does not mean you have no obligations to ensure that the residents of Marathon County have access to all the great things that the library has to offer. You're required to pay for it if you don't have one. And one thing, if you, when we delve into later conversations, if you want to do so, we can talk about those costs as Chair Robinson referenced, and we can talk about return on investment. But the document before you lays out, you're required to fund 70% of the cost of circulation by state statute if you don't have a library and individuals within the county need to access municipal or neighboring county libraries. And I can say very confidently, we can get you data that shows the circulation cost for Leah and her team that they have through our library. And math is a pretty straightforward thing. 70% of a circulation cost of $10, $7 is more than 100% the cost of circulation when your circulation is $6. So if you're really efficient, which our library is, you still are going to come out ahead, perhaps come out ahead when you do that analysis. But that first question still is, what services do you as the county board within the realm of state statutes want us to deliver? The second question is really one of level of service. And in our prior conversations with our other committees, I think we've highlighted a couple of ideas of what level of service might look like. One way to look at it, level of service can be something around time. If I'm a constituent and I want a service, let's say the issuance of a permit, the level of service I'm looking at is how quickly, what is the turnaround time between me applying for the permit being reviewed and issued. So time is one way we can measure level of service. And another way is quality. The example I've used repeatedly, Chair Robinson and I have used, and we used it at infrastructure this morning, pavement ratings, right? We all know what a county roadway is. We know what our county roadway system is, but how do you assess the quality of our maintenance? We do that through a PACER rating, a pavement rating score. Our goal that the county board has set is for staff to maintain an average PACER rating across that system of 7. That is a quality score that gives direction to staff where then to apply the resources, time, our staff dollars, and our materials to make that happen. The last one I'll say is another example of service level can be target population. We can have various programs that are not widely available, not available to everyone. The old, our previous our nurse home visiting program, that was a frequent area of discussion with the county board. Do you restrict access to that program to first-time parents, or is it open to anyone, regardless of the number of what child they're rearing at that point? So those are level of service determinations. And then the last one is cost. At what cost do we deliver services? And that's the document that we prepared that hopefully speaks to that is the rate and fee document. And in our previous conversations with the various committees, one takeaway we had as staff, and I'm going to work with department heads on this, is trying to make sure we can explain or articulate for the committees what has been our understanding of the fee philosophy that the county board has adopted with respect to the recovery of fees. And a lot of times you have, through your rules, delegated the responsibility for fee setting to either a standing committee or a program committee. So for example, the Parks Commission reviews fees for our various park programs. So they look at those fees, but what is the philosophy? For a park rental, is the idea that our fees should correlate to our total cost to deliver that service? Or do you want 75% cost recovery or something else? I think that's an area where the county board can weigh in. I can see certainly both ways. We have the example we used yesterday at Health and Human Services was our restaurant inspection program through the health department. Not a mandated program. We don't need to be in that business. The state will do it. We inspect restaurants based on the guidance we've gotten to do it every 6 months, to go in and make sure that things are working well. But the fees that we charge to do that for those restaurant licenses are meant to cover the cost to deliver that program. We could get out of that business and turn it over to the state, and what you'd see is a different level of service. The state, I can guarantee you, is not going to be in those restaurants every 6 months. You're more likely looking at every 3 years, maybe every 5 years. Pool inspections similarly. So I can see that the philosophy that the board might want staff to examine for fee structuring can change based on the program and service we're talking about. But that again is that third policy question for each of you to look at. And I also want to make two more points. Another takeaway from our previous discussions. Well, where does the conversation start? Do you want to start with programs, or do you want to start with a levy goal? We had a conversation with a previous committee. I think that started at Environmental Resources. And I think the committee came to the point where let's start with the program discussion. Are there things that we're not interested in continuing to do, or new things we want to do? Because it shouldn't always be about trying to cut. If there's a new priority you have, you should let us know. We can come up with a potential program to do that. The board has done that over time. Repeatedly, we've innovated in a lot of areas, starting new programs. So I don't want to say it always has to be about cutting. But start with the programs, because largely the tax levy, as we explained in that budget kickoff, it will take care of itself in terms of where it's going to end up. Your operating levy, we talk a lot about the levy limits. I'm not going to do it again here. It is going to be what it's going to be. Your operating levy is going to be what your levy was last year, plus any net new construction gain you're going to have. The overall levy is a function of a couple other things, but you can manipulate that overall levy very much like you did in the last budget process through the utilization of reserves, limiting borrowing, using ARPA funds. Those things can limit that overall need to increase the levy through debt service, for example. And then the last thing I'll talk about is, I already referenced this with UW Extension, but you are somewhat unique when you look at the library. This body is not going to develop the library budget. The library board does that. By statute, they have the obligation to develop that budget, present it to me, and ultimately their budget is considered by the county board. I think it is a great opportunity, however, to have a discussion and perhaps provide some things you want the library board to consider while they craft that budget. What are your priorities? What are the things you're looking for? So the fact that you're somewhat unique, that's the same conversation we had with infrastructure this morning, because infrastructure deals with the Central Wisconsin Airport, governed by an independent board, the CCI, the City County Information Technology Commission, governed by an independent board. So you still do have the opportunity to provide that input. Well, these are the things we're looking for you to accomplish, or we want you to think about in your budget building process. So that was longer than I intended, but I think Supervisor Robinson did a nice job of laying out those 3 iterative questions to ask. 1, what services do we provide? 2, at what level? And 3, at what cost? And the reason I think working in that way makes sense, we can, manipulating the fees or changing the fee structure late in the budget process really isn't, I don't suspect it to be a huge problem. We can change the fees. You have changed fees during the year. You just did it with the medical examiner's office. Level of service, we can likewise make those changes a little later in the process, but if we're going to do a new program, if the board directs us to start a new program, for example, Environmental Resources talked about really taking a look at what's the county role around maybe water quality and PFAS. We need to know that earlier, because we're going to need to bring you some ideas for you to make some decisions about what new programs or what goals do you want to accomplish, and then we can develop the programs around that. Similarly, if you want to kind of back away from a certain service, we need to know that early in the budget process to assess what might that look like, and then develop a budget proposal for the board to consider. That's going to take a little bit more time than those other things. So I don't know if anyone, Supervisor Robinson, if I missed anything that you were hoping I'd cover, or if anyone has any questions.
I think you've done a great job of covering what we are looking for through this process. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Administrator Leonard and Chair Robinson. One question, as this committee, according to what I'm getting out of it, is that we should review pretty much everything, or just what pertains to our committee?
I think the responsibility is what you have direct oversight for. So it would be the input to the library board as they develop the budget. So it would be recommendations, UW Extension, and then the 2 nonprofits, that being McDevco and Historic Society. If any supervisor has an area of interest on any of the other areas that the county board has responsibility for, it would be advantageous to attend that committee and provide that forethought and that input there. So, for example, if you had a concern about what the cost was for highway infrastructure, and the programming there, and wanted to impact the budget, that's where you provide the input to the program committee infrastructure. So they're the program area experts. In theory, they're the individuals that are the experts of those programs. So that's where each individual has the opportunity to provide that input at that program committee. So if, for example, there was someone here that had a thought about input at the UW Extension, they would have come to this meeting and provided the input to this committee.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs. Any questions from the committee? Tom?
I've always thought of Marathon County historically as being very conservative in their borrowing and very conservative in their operations in comparison to other counties in Wisconsin. Is that characterization accurate? I don't have any numbers, of course, but.
I'm not going to characterize it other than saying if you look at the Green Book data from the Wisconsin Counties Association, I think you would see that we do have a lower debt per capita. We've had that historically, despite the fact that we do have assets. And when I say assets, I primarily am talking about our highway system that require significant maintenance expense. And I talked about that in the budget kickoff and orientation, and I believe Chair Robinson did as well, that, you know, there are other counties that as a result of the kind of prolonged impact of levy limits they have been, forced is a strong word, but they've been induced to utilize borrowing to serve as a funding mechanism for expenses that in a perfect world you would fund under operations. And I'll give you an example. Again, looking at roadway maintenance. If you think about the system of highways that we have, more than 600 miles, that itself is the asset, right? It's the system. It's not that any 1 mile of roadway is all that valuable. It's the fact that each mile is part of a system of over 600 miles. So you would prefer to have funding to keep that system maintained at an optimal level, whatever you decide to do, through your operational budget and not have to borrow for that, because every time you borrow, as you know, essentially what you're doing is you're incurring interest payments during the life of that borrowing. So if you take 1 mile of roadway, a roadway project, you borrow to fund that $225,000 mill and replace roadway project. You borrow that over 20 years, you're paying interest during that entire time. And if you do that every year during that 20 years, you can see the compounding problem that happens. My sense from talking with my colleagues is that there's a number of counties, I don't know anyone that's doing that, putting it out for the full 20 years, but you do have a number of counties that are doing short-term borrowing for those roadway projects, essentially borrowing in 1 year, putting the entire amount on debt service the next year to essentially increase their operating capacity to do those maintenance projects. That is becoming more common. Marathon County hasn't historically done that. I do think, to your point, they've been innovative in terms of seeking out funding opportunities. This morning, Commissioner Griesbach spoke briefly about the vehicle registration fee that we have, that we all pay for the vehicles that we have registered. And the simple way to look at that, if you remove the kind of personal pain we each might have when we get that and have to pay that, is if you think about it as just a revenue generation tool, the alternative, if you didn't have that, would be borrowing. And the cost, the transaction cost for the vehicle registration fee, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's exceedingly low. What the state charges us to effectively gather that revenue for us is very little. Whereas when you borrow, you not only have the interest costs that I talked about, but you have a number of lawyers that are referred to as bond counsel that make sure all your borrowing issues are done appropriately, that you're advertising that opportunity, and that you're capturing the correct language throughout that entire process, and that comes at a cost, several $1,000s to issue any debt on top of the interest. So I think Marathon County has sought out those opportunities for kind of more diverse funding streams, and that's why the rate and fee discussion is important. You know, looking at what is the appropriate philosophy to have to make sure that we are capturing those other revenues. The other thing we do, and this has been what I infer to be a policy of the board, is to be very proactive in seeking out alternative funding streams. One of the things that is going to be on the agenda next week for public safety and for HR finance and for the full board is the work we've done around the Forensic Science Center, trying to make that happen, seeking out funding from the state of Wisconsin and the federal government. So trying to do everything we can to drive down the cost of government. Jim Griesbach spoke this morning about a lot of his highway projects are 80-20 splits. We show up with 20 cents, and the state gives us 80 to finish a project. So that's a good deal. Jim says, he's used the analogy, if every time I show up and I give them two dimes, they give me $1, I'm going to have a pocket full of dimes. And that's entirely true. We will seek out those funding things. So I hesitate to say Marathon County is conservative, use whatever word you want in terms of budgeting, but when you look around, I think we do a lot of things that are designed with the intent from the board, as I have interpreted it, to manage that tax levy impact. Your operating levy is fixed, but the thing that's going to change your overall tax levy is really that debt service.
Okay, we have any other questions? Okay, as a committee, go back and review what you think we maybe should do or shouldn't do as far as the budget. And do we bring back information to you, Lance, or do we do it as a full committee?
That would be, if I may, Mr. Chair, that would be a committee discussion and ultimately the board, right? You're going to come up with any recommendations that would work their way through the board if you want a new program or to reduce a program. And I guess my offer to you is if you do want to take these and go through, and if you have questions, for example, on page 41 of the document, hey, well, really, what is the Dairy and Livestock Production and Management Education Program? What does that do? What does Extension do to deliver that? If you have any other questions about, the horticulture program, food-wise, we can get you that information if you want it. I hesitate to just show up with, I know this is a lot of information. We can get you a lot more information. It's really interesting. I think it's really interesting. When you talk about pesticide applicator training, really interesting stuff. But you all have interests outside of this, and you can watch PBS on your own time. So what do you want to know that will help you in the budget process of determining what programs and services you want to continue having delivered is really the whole point of this conversation. Because I'll tell you, and I said this morning, absent direction from the county board to stop doing a certain program or decrease service level or increase service level or start a new program, staff approach this process the absolute same way every year. And that is, you've told us historically what you want done. We will do our best to deliver the same services at the same service level at the same cost. And the way we do that is by continuing to strive for efficiency wherever possible. We will come with, if we do think there's a new program that we should pursue, we will bring it to a committee, and then you can have a discussion about how to fund that. Otherwise, we're going to keep looking for those efficiencies. We are the how people. You are the what. What do we want to do? We are the how. The example, again, I'll use is, we're not asking the county board, we didn't ask the county board to say, hey, should we use the Start Right model or the Nurse Family Partnership model for a nurse home visiting program? Staff can make the change of the how, but you have decided historically to deliver a nurse home visiting program. We don't expect supervisors, the county board, to weigh in on, hey, what's the appropriate foam asphalt mix to aggregate for our highway work. We do that. We need you to tell us what is the quality you want. What are the underlying things you're looking for? Is it a 20-year replacement with a PACER rating of 7? Or, as some counties have, do you want to have a 100-year replacement on roadway? they look different. You'll know when you're driving on a roadway that it's on a 100-year replacement schedule as opposed to a 20-year. Yeah. Yeah, there's a number of them that have that. But so that's what we're looking for from the board. I mean, and we will, the cumulative effect of levy limits are such that we've done a lot of that already. I don't think we have, there's always room for efficiencies. I don't mean to say that, but we've done a lot of that. We need direction from the board. If you want us to stop doing something, or you want a higher level of service, if you've heard from constituents that, hey, our turnaround time on X permit is too long, we need to improve that, let us know and we'll tell you what that's going to cost and what we need from you in terms of prioritization. Because as you all know with the levy limits, we don't just have the ability to, all right, hire more staff to do that. We're going to have to either deprioritize some other things, or we can look for efficiencies and maybe we can do that, but we do that every year. So that's why we're looking for that guidance from each of the standing committees and ultimately the full board on starting with what programs, then level of service, and lastly, cost.
Lance, is it possible to get the mandatory discretionary program document, the rates and fees, and the 5-year plan in hard copy? The stuff we got in our minutes.
Yeah, I sent an email to everyone with each of those documents.
And
Yeah, we certainly can print that out for you if you.
I don't want to print it out myself.
Okay. Yeah. I think we have that in some line item in a county board budget. Okay.
Okay, any other questions for Administrator Leonard? Okay, thank you. Moving on, number 6, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. None. Number 7, educational presentation and committee discussion. 7A, McDepco. Kim could not make it today, so you look through the report, and if you have any questions, get a hold of her. So, 7B, library monthly report. Leah.
Is this on? Oh, it is. Thank you, Chair Seefeld. I will keep my overview brief. You have the report in your packet. One of the most exciting things that we are able to do starting May 1st, that was this Monday, is we applied for and were accepted to the Check Out Wisconsin State Parks at Your Library program. So that's something that any public library in the state can apply for, and we were selected to be a part of that program. And I believe we got 50 passes. It doesn't sound like a lot, so I don't know how it's going to go, but we're giving out 5 passes a week until they run out. And so far, they were released on Monday, the first 5, and I think there's 1 left right now for this week, but then we'll be reloaded with another 5 on Monday. Those can be accessed at the main library. If at some point in the future we get more passes, we'll have passes hopefully at all of the branch locations, but because of the very limited number, we're just doing it in Wausau. That means anyone, though, in the county can come to the Wausau Library and pick up a pass. All you need to do is know what date you're going to be attending the park, and then and it's a family pass, and it's free, and you can go to any park in the state of Wisconsin, any state park, for free with these passes. So we're really excited about that program. Some of our staff worked pretty hard to fill out the application and make sure that, we gave the state initiative to pick us, and they did. Another internal thing that happened is we got a new sorter. If you don't know what a sorter is, I think it's technically called an automated materials handler. It's a machine that sorts all of our materials when they get checked in. You would be surprised that we shelve like tens of thousands of materials every month, and this sorter helps us. And our last one was on its last legs, so to speak. It's a very expensive piece of machinery, and we sent out RFPs several months ago. vendor was selected by our library board, and it just got installed, and it's working beautifully. It's a glorious machine if that's the kind of thing you're into. We're really happy about it, and it should last us more than a decade. We interviewed several people who have the same company sorter, and like there are no issues a decade plus. So we're really happy that we won't have to think about this for quite some time. On that note, our aquarium is another story. We've had a couple of issues with the aquarium in the past. We've had a couple of leaking issues, and we have an amazing aquarium professional who comes in on a regular basis, and he was able to solve some of these issues. But I'm only bringing this up just sort of off the cuff that we most recently had another leak. Now, it wasn't like a crisis where like the fish were in danger leak. But again, this has been happening on a recurring basis. The original company who put the aquarium in, I don't know if you ever saw, there was like a show, I can't remember what it was called. Tank Wars, something like that. Yeah. And so that is the company out of Las Vegas who built our aquarium. Sadly, we weren't on the TV show. But that company apparently has gone defunct. So we did have a warranty, but you cannot get a hold of the company because they no longer exist. And so we're dealing with what we have. We have our aquarium specialist paying attention to any issues, but we did have a couple of scares. We did not lose any fish in the past, but we had it where there was, for those of you virtually, about like 8 to 10 inches of water when we came in the morning, and it was terrifying. But we saved all the fish, and we're just keeping an eye on that. That's something that Lance, since you're here, will be putting it on our non-county CIP project list because it's a very expensive thing. And I have to say, like, again, as far as standards for libraries are concerned, it is not like a expected, like, base service that a library provides to have an aquarium, but I will tell you that it gets a lot of love. Like the children, the adults, I mean, everybody comes to see our fish. We have a really, really kind of incredible thing. We base programming around it. And, you know, I like to think of it as almost a makerspace. It's like an interactive, like feature that we have at the library that's educational and also just delightful. So that's something that we would like to continue. And so that's going to be probably a big cost coming up in the not too distant future. I mean, I'm hoping distant future, but it's looking like sooner rather than later. Otherwise, our programming has been going very well. We just did an update for the library board at the last month's meeting on our digitization project. That's something that we're working, it's throughout the state of Wisconsin, but the Marathon County Public Library is a big part of that, digitizing a lot of local history. If you don't know, we have almost all of the Wausau area yearbooks. So if you grew up here or your spouse did, you might want to check out what they look like in their senior photos. We have a lot of other things too. Really cool pictures about, like, you know, the history of the Wausau area with the logging, and, you know, there's a lot of great information in Mosinee. They do a great job of keeping track of their historical documents. And of course, the Historical Society is a great part of that too, but we're working actively to digitize these documents so anybody can access them for the comfort of your own home if you have internet access, or you can always come into the library. So that's a big project that's coming up. And then at our upcoming meeting this May, Taylor, our children's librarian, will be talking about the 2023 summer library program, just what's happening upcoming, because I know the weather won't tell you, maybe today, but it's going to be the summer really soon. So we're already prepped and ready for this final school bells of the year, and we're going to have a lot of great programming throughout all of our locations in Marathon County. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions for Leah? Very good report, and hope you get your fish aquarium
Thank you.
taken care of. And no, I'm not coming to the library to look at an annual. Okay, next 7C, UW Extension Month Report. Jeremy.
All right, thank you, Chair Seefeld. Good to see you all. I'll be pretty brief, but I did bring Janelle Ware, our horticulture educator, with us, and I would like to give her a little bit of time to share some of her programming as well. But a few quick updates before then. We're in the process of hiring the Healthy Communities Coordinator with FoodWise. I've talked about that one maybe every month I've been here for the past 4 months, but we're actually into the hiring process. We had about 16 applicants for that. That's a regional position, so works in Marathon, Wood, Portage, and Clark counties. And we have initial interviews next week, so that we expect to have someone on board in June. And then also our Marathon County FoodWise educator, we're in the process of hiring. So that position is posted right now. We'll be doing interviews late May, so also have that person on board this summer. That position in the past has had kind of a focus on older adults in the community. They'll still continue to do some of that work, but there'll be more emphasis in working with the school district in this position, just because we're seeing a greater need there for nutrition education, and the school district is really interested in some partnerships there to expand programs in the schools. So just as a reminder, those two positions with FoodWise, those are actually federally funded positions. Those come along with the county co-funded program in the county. So those are just kind of added benefits to Marathon County. And then one other quick update. When Holly and the 4-H crew was here last month, she gave an update about the increase in numbers and mentioned that we're getting close to that 1,000 member mark, and we actually passed that this past week. So we're up over 1,000 members of 4-H again, which is pretty amazing to see that growth again. Going back just a couple of years, we were in the 600 range, so we're getting back up to and hopefully past kind of historical numbers. So it's really great to see that. They're doing amazing work. We'll actually have 4 AmeriCorps members as part of the 4-H team this summer. So that's all additional outside funding that Holly has brought in to support her and Jasmine's work. So exciting to see all of that going well. Before I turn it over to Janelle, any questions about the other updates or anything that I just mentioned?
Any questions for Jeremy? Okay.
All right.
You're up,
Pass it over to
Janelle.
Janelle.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Janelle Ware. I am your county extension horticulture educator. So just wanted to share a little bit about some of the programming that I do. I do a lot of public outreach with the libraries. Recently, since I've been here in Marathon County, I've been working with the Wausau branch. We recently picked up the Hatley branch and is going to be offering programming over there now, so I'm excited. But I really wanted to focus today on just sharing with you some of the therapeutic horticulture programs that I've been doing. So first off, I wanted to share with you about the Gaining Ground program. As you may know, the location for the Gaining Ground, the original location for the Gaining Ground programming is being utilized by the city at some point in the future. And because of that and some other issues with that location, I've had already been directing programming at different locations. So specifically, let me explain a little bit about that. I work with folks who, if they get in trouble and have community service or end up in drug court, depending on the day of the week that they're available, they may get to spend some time with me. I'm planning this summer to do, and I'm starting this Sunday. So from this Sunday through the end of the growing season, so the end of October, I will be meeting with the Addict Services folks Sunday mornings from 9 to noon. Couple of areas where we'll be working. The YMCA in Weston has a gigantic garden that they could use some help with, and so we're going to be helping them. All food grown there will be donated mostly to Neighbor's Place, but if they have more food to donate, they've got some other places where they donate the food too. I've also been working with, there is a home on 3rd Street that serves as a transitional sober living place for women to go if they're in drug court, for them to live in. Starting last year, we started rehabbing the landscaping there, kind of really building those green industry skills for the folks that are hanging out with me. So we will continue to work on the landscaping there, as well as we installed 4 raised beds. Right now, one is planted with raspberries and another one is planted with strawberries. And then we'll have 2 more beds for just vegetable production. Over at Attic Services itself, we installed 4 raised beds with the idea of doing cut flower production. And we're hopeful eventually to be able to sell cut flowers at the farmer's market. But that's something, a little bit down the road. So right now we just need to learn how to grow those cut flowers. So that way they'll be beautiful and people will want to buy them. There's also a couple of other locations that I'll be taking the Gaining Ground programming with, but those will be Sunday mornings. I have also partnered with the women's community. So once a month on Sunday afternoons, we are working together. I'm working specifically with a domestic violence support group, domestic violence survivors support group, and they are Hmong women. And so once a month, we're going to be working together and doing some cool gardening programming. And I am connecting them with access to the teaching garden that we have over on River Drive too. So not only will we be able to have programming once a month, they'll be directed by me, but I'm also going to have them have access to that garden too. So they'll be able to go in there and work in those gardens together. One other therapeutic program item that I've done recently is I partnered with a couple of funeral homes within the area and their aftercare services, and invited, it was open to everybody in the community, plus they had their own audience that they were bringing in with the idea of talking about how gardening can help with grief. And so they had their aftercare specialists talking about that grief piece, and I was there to help them with the planting and starting new herbs. That was a really cool partnership, and we are planning on piggybacking off of that this fall and doing another program then. And just a couple of other therapeutic programs that I've been doing. Once a month, I have been working with The Landing with folks who are young at heart, but over 55, and doing some opportunities for them to engage in positive socialization, which is so important with that demographic because isolation can become a problem with them. And so providing them with opportunities to learn new things as well as engage with each other too. Oh, backing up just a little bit, I wanted to share with you specifically with that grief group that I worked with, a little anecdote that I came out of that. One of the folks that was there had been identified by the aftercare folks over at one of the funeral homes. And she mentioned that event, that activity, that was the first social activity that she had participated in since the loss of her loved one. So I just kind of walked away with, wow, that was kind of a nice, powerful share that she gave us. And then just real briefly, I wanted to mention a couple of upcoming programs that I have coming up. So, oh, darn it, and I lost the date. So on Wednesday, May 17th, I will be doing 2 programs at the library. I do programs at the library. This is just kind of general public outreach. I do programs twice on Wednesdays, one day out of the month, but I offer it at 10 a.m. and at 6 p.m. Those have been fantastically attended, and I started doing virtual programming with them, I believe it was April of 2020, so immediately after the lockdown. And I want to say it was 2 months ago I started finally being able to get in there and do an in-person programming. And I'm just really thrilled that the attendance has been fantastic. I'm really, really excited about how many people are coming. Also, that same day, I will be doing a program at 1 p.m. at the Landing. The library programs are going to be about raspberry cultivation. We call that a berry good time. And at the Landing, the program at 1 p.m. will be about growing blueberries in containers and why that might be something of interest for folks. That following Thursday at 6 p.m., I'll be doing the raspberry cultivation program. Again, this is at Mosinee High School. It's a partnership that I have with them with their community education. I do a lot of other cool programs too, and so I definitely encourage, if you're interested at all in my programs, there's lots of details in my county report that I give every month. Any questions?
Do we have any questions? Okay, well, it sounds like you got a busy summer coming up.
It's fun.
Well, at least you're saying it's fun, so that's good.
I don't know if my community service folks think so.
Yeah, okay.
You bring berries in later on?
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question. So if someone attend one of the events like on May 17th, would they leave with a plant or they just leave with the knowledge of what to go get to how to do it?
So the library programs that I've been doing, no, they won't be leaving with something. But I do more with the stuff that are therapeutic. I try to have kits. So I was doing programming with, we got started doing programming with Among Elders at the ADRC dinners. That's kind of at a hiccup right now because I was connected with the FoodWise educator, Gao Nu, Tao, and she's moved on to a different position within Extension. But for those programs, they would have something that they would take home. But the general programs that I'm doing, just to kind of keep costs and to be able to do programming at the rate that I'm doing, it's more of a knowledge. That said, the grief program, that they went home with a kid. So it kind of varies, but generally speaking, the libraries is just coming in and learning something.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, moving on to 7D, UWSP WASA report. Dr. Towns.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So our enrollment, when it comes to our applications and admits, they continue to be up from this time last year. Of course, we won't know the enrollment numbers until the 10th day of classes in September. I know that's usually always the first question I get, but we are excited that the application and admits are up. So what we're working on now, mainly our recruiter, is getting those students confirmed. And getting them confirmed means, yes, I'm gonna be there in the fall. And we do have 3 orientations this summer, one in June, one in July, one in August. So that's when the students come, get their schedules, learn more about the campus, computing, getting their emails set up, all that good stuff. So just hoping to get those students confirmed so we can keep those numbers up. Another thing in regards to enrollment is, you might remember on a couple of the reports I had that I was working on a finish up campaign. So basically we reached out to students who stopped out around the pandemic, some a little before, because some of the students we found were on the old plans before the merger. And so I spent 2 weeks ago calling students saying, hey, are you interested in coming back to finish your degree? You're really close to finishing your degree. And we focused on students who had at least 45 credits of 60. Some students may have had 42, so we just really depend on, but we want to focus on those who are kind of soon to finish and really try to get them to come in the fall to register for classes either online or on the campus. I had a lot of wrong numbers, a lot of missing numbers, things of that nature, and so I did have personal emails, and I emailed students yesterday, and I think I received like 7 back saying, yes, I'm interested in knowing what I need to do to come back. So really excited about that. We hope to get more emails. I do have 2 other people who are making calls, so hopefully they'll get some responses back as well. This is something that I did at UW Whitewater with the program, so it's effective in getting some students back, but just letting them know that it's possible to come back and finish up. But for some students, I found out they went on to other institutions and graduated, and I was like, congratulations, I'm happy for you. But they said, thank you for checking in. So they were really appreciative of that. So, and another thing I was working on as well is students who applied to the main campus in Point, but were denied access. They were denied admittance to the campus. And so they were told, like, you can go to the Marshfield or the Wausau campus, but, you know, for a semester or so, bring up your GPA and then reapply or, well, mainly transfer over. So we reached out to those students. And so mainly we took, there was a lot of students. We took the list. And so those students who ideally was within an hour of our campus, I reached out to those students personally and say, hey, I know you got denied admittance to the main campus, but you can come to the Wausau campus. These are some things we have here. You can come for a year, get your GPA up, and then transfer over. Because some of these students really want to live on campus and all that kind of stuff. And so, and then Tony over at Marshfield, who's the executive, he did the same thing with students within his geographical area. And then students who were like 2 hours away or more, we just sent a general email from both campuses saying, hey, you know, these are the branch campuses. You can come to us, but, you know, ideally those students really want to be at the main campus. But just a way to reach out to see if we can get some of those students. And so I asked the admissions folks if we can get those names early, because we didn't get those names until like February, March, and that's really late. So I asked if we can get those names every 2 weeks starting August 1st, which is when applications open up. So hopefully we can get those students very quickly because several students said they decided to go to another school. But again, just reaching out. Let's see here. So, you know, July will mark my 1 year here, so I'm excited about starting the second year, so everything won't be like, oh, I do that too. 'Cause that's pretty much what I say every single day, but, you know. But one thing I really want to do this summer is connect more with the folks in the community. So I was able to meet with, you know, several superintendents and principals and things of that nature, but I do want to meet with more community leaders. So if, you know, anybody on the call want to meet with me, some people I know to meet with, others reached out to me because I had no idea. But if there's someone I really need to meet with, like, Ozella, you need to meet with this person, please let me know who these people are, because I'm still trying to figure all this out. So that would be very helpful to me in the campus. And one thing I talked about before was a survey we sent out. And so it was 3 surveys. One went to students, one went to our faculty and staff only at the Wausau campus, and one went to community members. And that survey closed on April, is it 30 days in April? So it closed on April 30th. Faculty and staff responses, we had about 39, which is pretty good. Students, we only had 40 students, so that was not good. That was about 10% of our fall enrollment, and we do have more students than that. We had more students that came in the spring. So 40 wasn't really good, so I was hoping to get more students. But community folks, we had about 363 community folks, so I was pretty excited about that. So we haven't went through that data yet, but we will have some listening sessions to present that data. And those of you, did anybody in here remember getting that survey? Because everybody, I don't know, but I know the chamber sent it out. It was on our Facebooks. If you're on Facebook, you would have saw Facebook ads. So went out to several. If you were alumni, you should have got it. But just asked, and, you know, basically, you know, what are some things, I wish I had the questions, but it was about 4 or 5 questions. And basically asked about the perceptions of the campus, what are some things we need, what are some things we should be doing, things of that nature. So we will be presenting that data soon and really trying to figure out what we can do to address those needs and concerns and for our community. And then the last thing, College for Kids, June the 19th through the 23rd. This is for K through 6th grade students. So if anybody have kids, grandkids that need somewhere to go for a little bit, we will have these classes on the campus. You can find those on the Continuing Ed website.
Okay, thank you for the report. Do we have any questions? It sounds like everybody is going to have a busy summer, so keep up the good work. Okay, number 8, next meeting date, time, announcements, and future agenda items. 8A, committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussion. B, next meeting, Thursday, June 1st, 2023 at 3 p.m. Number 9, I will take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Supervisor Boo, second by Supervisor Rosenberg. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you, everyone.